Jeanette. Jeanette's a strategic business advisor with more than 15 years of continuous improvement, Deep Six Sigma experience. And she's led a bunch of really high impact transformations around development approval. So someone's trying to make a building or develop something in a municipality, speeding that up, policing, procurement, and social services. So that's, thank you, Jeanette, for joining us. And I'm Craig. I'm the founder of Lean Agility. I did a little bit of work at the start of the project that we're going to go through, but then my colleague Alain did a terrific job, and I have to give him a shout out as well. And also a shout out to Jeanette as the sort of black belt who was working on this project on the city of Burlington side. She was absolutely fundamental in making this project we're going to cover a success. So the why is this a useful topic for people who are sort of in the Lean Six Sigma, continuous improvement, OpEx world? What they were able to do in Burlington, they're able to cut the time in half of certain types of development permits. And I don't know if you know this, but in the province of Ontario, that's a really big priority for the government of Ontario. So that's, and it is in other jurisdictions as well. So you might get some tips and tricks to apply to your own, if you're in a municipality, to your own development permit process. Or other review and approval processes. And one of the things that we want you to get out of this this talk was they ended up with measurable results, improved results, and then they continued to improve on their own afterward. We're going to look at how they got from the start to that point, and what are the things they did that allowed them to avoid a lot of the problems that you often see in many continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma type programs. So hopefully you'll find some things that are practical that you can apply in your own work, in your own sort of project work. So I'll pass it over to Jeanette to get us started. And Jeanette, it's been a pleasure to work with you, and I'm looking forward to hearing your part of the talk again, because you're always inspiring to me. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Craig. I guess we can get into the slides then. All right, so Craig mentioned that we have done a couple of projects together. So my team and his team have worked on two types of process reviews in the development services area. So if you work for a city, you know that people who want to build things in the city have to get approvals before they can proceed with their plans. And we have done two types of application processes that way. So the Streamlined Development Application Fund project was focused on low density, small project type of applications. So these are very high in volume at the city, but they have low impact on the strategy and really the overall design of the city. And they are for like small things like a deck or building a house. Low density qualifies for anything that's less than 10 units in the plan. This year, or this past year, we've been working on the Streamlined Development Application Process, which are for those large development projects. So this is what we call high density. It's anything over 10 units. And so if you see a condo going up in your city, that is what would be a large development project. And it goes through a different process. And so we're reviewing that this year. And so we're going to use examples from both of these projects as we go through. And so our objective today is, Craig, and I won't kind of redo what Craig said, but we're essentially here to talk about how we've partnered to move the needle on improving the development application processes at the city using some real life examples so that you can really connect it back to your work when you leave and see how you can apply it when you get back to your home base. And so Craig already mentioned that our big impact that we like to brag about is cutting the review time in half for some of these review processes, particularly in our area of zoning. So what's the rules for how you can use the space in the city? We've had the most impact in that area. But also we've eliminated 5 types of applications that require review in our engineering area, saving 20 hours of staff effort each file that comes in. And we've also been able to reduce 2 weeks of work through the improvement of the file assignment step. This was a very small change. It was actually staff-led. It was a quick turnaround, but it had huge impact. And so we'll walk through kind of how to identify some of those quick wins. So for you today, I'll ask you a few questions. Go ahead there, Craig.
Sorry, last time you clicked.
I know. So think about your experience with improvement. Have you ever received a report from a consultant or a staff member with recommendations for change that never get executed, and that report just sits on a shelf? Quick show of hands from your reaction if you've ever had that experience. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Next question. Started strong with an improvement, but lost momentum over time, or you've made a change that you can't sustain. Has anyone had this problem in their experience? Yeah, it's tricky business. All right, next question. Have you ever felt like you never really moved the needle? So you put a lot of effort into trying to make improvement, but you've never really moved the needle so you can feel the change, specifically with complex or reoccurring pain points. So if anyone has ever lived in the world of planning and development, it is incredibly complex. So to be able to move the needle in this area has been very challenging. And so we want to share with you how to, because it is a perfect example of complex and reoccurring problems. All right, we'll move forward.
All right,
Go ahead,
cool.
Craig.
Thanks, Jeanette. So the ability to kind of sidestep the problems in those three questions. The method that Jeanette and Burlington used with a bit of our help was really based on this little formula that I'm going to show you on the screen. So here's the formula, and I think it's been really helpful to me as I kind of came up with the pieces of it and assembled it. It really helped me understand why things don't get done or don't get done to the level we don't get the results that we kind of want. So here's the formula. R equals the result. So the sustained result that you get, did you cut the time in half? Did you cut the effort by 20 hours? Are you able to sustain that and even get better at it? So that's what the result is. Did you actually achieve that? The result you get is equal to, this is kind of logical, the quality of the idea. So if you have a 100% idea, you've got a shot at getting a 100% result. Does it make sense that the quality of the idea, the quality of the solution is really critical? If we don't have a great quality solution that works, you're not going to get the result. So obviously, a lot of the training, the quality of the idea, the training and that we do, and a lot of the focus of a lot of facilitators is coming up with the best idea. But the best idea in the world is only as good as the desire or the buy-in of the people that do the work and their leaders to want to try that idea out and to want to and test it and to experiment with it and to find out if it works. So does it make sense if we have a 100% idea, but only multiplied by 50% desire or buy-in? 100% times 50% is only 50%. So that's kind of going to be a ceiling on your result score. So maybe you've seen great ideas that have kind of gone to the boneyard, that have kind of never gone anywhere because they didn't have high levels of buy-in or desire. So desire is equally important in this formula. Now, makes sense that great idea multiplied by great buy-in is then multiplied by your level of execution, how well the organization can actually execute, implement, the execution, the breaking it down into its small parts, doing those steps, and then leading to results and those cycles of experimentation as you go. If you have a great idea with great buy-in, but you're not very good at execution, so 100% times 100% multiplied by 50%, you're still only going to get a 50%. And I'd encourage you, think about an initiative that you're working on right now. What would be your R score right now? So your R score is I is the quality of the idea. So 100 out of 100, 100%. Multiplied by the desire out of 100% multiplied by the ability to execute. Often you'll see that you'll have like 100% idea, 75% buy-in, and 75% execution. You end up with a score significantly lower. So if you're doing this equation on a project that you have in mind right now, type in the chat, what do you think your score would be right now? What would your percentage score be when you do this? So what I wanted you to get out of this little formula is, it's not mathematical, it's notional, is that I, D, and E, these things, if you don't have high levels of all three, you're probably not going to have a very good result. And in fact, in a lot of knowledge and service work, this desire or buy-in is so prominent because people choose what they do, when they do it, and how they do it. So if we don't get their hearts and minds, our great ideas are probably not going to turn into great results. Let's take a look at each of these in a little bit of detail now. I'll kind of give you a little bit of the theory behind, and then Jeanette will kind of take you through how that was applied in this project. Look at the first one. The first one, the I, coming up with a great idea. Have you ever worked on worked on a project and you worked with the team and you thought you did amazing analysis, and then it gets time to convert that analysis around what are the problems that we need to solve and the root causes. And then the team comes up with ideas that are kind of like solution ideas that are kind of meh, they're not really going anywhere. Let's train our users. Let's implement a new IT system. And you go, I don't know, those aren't really breakthroughs. How can you create breakthroughs? There's one technique that will encourage you to try, and they tried in Burlington, which is basically, if you want to come up with a real breakthrough idea, you got to challenge your assumptions about what you can and cannot do. So what's a way to challenge your assumptions? Well, it's to make the question even tougher. What we call these impossible questions. So it's to say, if we're trying to reduce the elapsed time of a given process by 30%, instead of reducing it by 30%, just for a thinking challenge, what if we tried to make it go 99% faster? And we use that, boy, we'd really have to think more deeply about how we do that and question our assumptions. What if we wanted it done 100% correctly, correct 100% of the time? What if we wanted to triple the amount of work we could get done without working harder? Or what if we wanted to eliminate 98% of the steps? Now, you might just say, well, just have AI do it or digitize the process. But we make it even tougher by putting some constraints. So these questions, these thinking questions, you'd have to do them without reducing quality inappropriately, without anybody working harder, without spending money you haven't already got in the budget, without adding any technology you don't already have, adding people, or introducing unreasonable risk. So this makes it even tougher. And to make it even tougher still, increasing your customer or your citizen satisfaction and making the work charge your batteries instead of drain them. Or as Marie Kondo, the tidiness guru, might have said, make the process spark joy instead of making people feel sad and hopeless in the process. So if we use these strictly as a thinking challenge, we'll come up with ideas that we wouldn't have come up with before. And let's take a look at some of the the other benefit of this is that you'll have a smaller number of solutions. You'll be able to get to a smaller number of solutions that have a larger impact. Instead of having 100 solutions, you don't have a hope of actually trying to execute. Jeanette, why don't you take us through some of the possible questions that you asked in the project?
Yeah, the key to this exercise is getting your team right out of the current state, because they're going to try to design their future state using the constraints of the now. And so what the challenging questions do is, like, these things are not possible in the now. And so it takes them out of that constraint of what they're experiencing now before they've improved things, and allowed them to really stretch into what the realm of the possible could look like. And so for us, it was like, what if we completed the pre-building permit review process in one day? By the way, in the current state, this took like 8 months at the high end of an application time. So what if we could do it in one day? What would we have to do to be able to achieve that? Then you start solutioning from there. What if the pre-building permit process took 95% less effort than it does today? So if staff had to only do 5% of what they're doing today to get it done. What if the pre-building permit process was completely error-proofed, meaning no rework, no errors, and no missing information? Applications that come in, especially in this low-density process, are coming in from like individual homeowners. So they're not architects, they're not planners, they're not developers. So they don't know the rules of engagement. They come in error-ridden. What if we got rid of all of those errors? And so that would mean one review cycle instead of many. There'd be no back and forth with the customer when we go back and forth in the current state all the time, like for many weeks at a time. And then we would have high quality submissions the first time. So even an individual homeowner is able to submit a good application on their first try without having to go back and make many corrections. And so I'm always a big advocate for root cause analysis, because if you know, in the realm of politics, there's a lot of symptom chasing. Your politicians can bring you a solution that is based on what they're seeing or a complaint that they have, rather than understanding why that complaint happened or what the root cause of that complaint is. And so we start chasing symptoms, which is why our problems keep bubbling back up. If we don't solve them at the root, we don't solve them sustainably. And so one good way to start with a good analysis is with a value stream process map. Now, this is a picture of our process map. It's very small, but you can essentially see there's a ton of stickies here. The little gray stickies are the actual process steps, but then we go back through and we get data about how long things take, how much effort things take, what errors occur at each step. And then you can throw it into a spreadsheet like this. And what this does is it gives you some really quantifiable understanding of where your bottlenecks are, where you're wasting time, where things sit before they can move forward, and where all of your errors are. So then you have a way of finding where you're going to have the most impact with your effort and start solutioning from there. We'll bring up the next. The other important thing is to make sure that you consider the voice of your customer. So in every project I do, there's a voice of the customer exercise, but in these projects, we've actually even gone as far as to create a specific customer journey map. So we understand their experience through the steps themselves and what their pain points might look like. And so this way, we're looking at pain points from both the staff perspective and the customer perspective, and the future state design is balancing the needs of both. Moving forward. And this is what we call a cause and effect matrix, or Craig's team, I believe, calls it an interrelationship matrix. And what this does is it helps understand leverage points in a system. So there are sometimes a pain point can be the root cause to many other pain points throughout your process, especially an upstream pain point can have many impacts downstream. And so if you find the right ones, you can actually fix a whole bunch of pain points with just one solution. It's like this Pareto concept of 80-20. You can fix 80% of your problems by finding solutions for 20% of the pain points. And so what it does is you get the most value for your effort, and you're not spending time trying to fix everything. You're spending time trying to fix the most important things that will have the most impact.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
awesome,
Craig.
awesome. So this, I can't overstate how important it is to, once you have like a relatively short list, here's our top 12 problems to solve. I guarantee you there are probably 3 or 4 of those problems that cause the 7, 8, or 9. That so understanding that is actually going to make your job a lot easier and make execution and buy-in easier, because you can go with a much slimmer set of solutions rather than 100 solutions that you really don't have a hope of ever really being able to achieve. All right, we're going to move to desire or buy-in. So, we're not going too deep into the coming up with a great idea, because there's so much training and there's so much mentoring and coaching around that. Where we think the opportunities often lie is increasing both desire or buy-in and then execution. So, do you ever find that you lose momentum, right? So let's look at what we can do to create more buy-in and to make sure we've got people who are really, really engaged in doing the work and working together. So creating psychological safety is a really important key that they did in Burlington, and that is really important. What do we mean by psychological safety, and how does this connect to buy-in? Psychological safety, Amy Edmondson from Harvard she coined the term. Basically, it's a belief that I'm not going to be punished or humiliated if I raise a crazy idea, or if I ask a question, or if I have a concern, I won't look like I'm negative, or if I made a mistake, I won't be punished because I made a mistake or admitted that I made a mistake, and that it's safe for us to just be ourselves as a team working together. So creating psychological safety is really, really important, and actually there's some predictors of how successful a team will be just based on the level of psychological safety. Microsoft was trying to understand. Not Microsoft, pardon me, Google was trying to understand, they knew which product development cross-functional teams were the highest performing at Google, because they knew how many patents had been issued. They knew not just patents, but how much revenue the different products had created. So they knew which teams produced the best, but they didn't know why. So they had a bunch of behavioral psychologists observe how these different teams worked without knowing which were the highest performing or lowest performing. And they reported on how each of those teams worked, what their style of work was. And by correlating the behaviors of those teams or the environments of those teams to the level of high performance, they came up with a list of 5 predictors of how successful a Google team would be. And some of them might be surprising, some less so. Number 5, the 5th most important thing that determined Google study whether a team would be high performing, impact. Makes sense that if the team members believe they're going to have a positive impact, they'll give their best efforts and they'll collaborate, right? Impact, meaning if the work is personally meaningful or important to the team members, as opposed to I don't really care about what we're doing, you're going to see team members will collaborate much better and try much harder if the work is personally meaningful to them. The third is it's not surprising at all, I don't think. It's basically structure and clarity. We have clear plans, clear goals, project plans, project management 101, basically. Pretty predictive of how successful a team will be. Number two, dependability. You might think this means I'm going to hold myself accountable to my commitments. It's not just that individuals in Google's study held themselves accountable to deliver on their parts, but also that the individuals held the team accountable for the team's performance. So they didn't check out. They'd say, hey, if the team's not performing well, they'd step in and raise their hand and get involved. But number one in Google's assessment, psychological safety was greater than 2, 3, 4, and 5 combined. What that basically means is that when team members, this is so powerful, when team members can kind of be themselves in the team, and they don't have to spend all their effort trying to look perfect or wearing a mask or trying to look like I have all the answers, you're going to find it's a much higher performing team than that. So how did we create psychological safety in the Burlington project? Well, one of the things that we did when we did some training up front, but one of the things we did at the very start was we did a little training module on psychological safety and how important it is in improvement for people not be afraid to raise their hand and say there's a problem. They wouldn't feel like they're being negative or, they're struggling with something, raise their hand. We did a little exercise. I went first. We went around, we said, what's your name? What do you want to get out of this project together? And the third and fourth questions were, third question, what's something you're really proud of that you've done in your past? Because we've all had successes. But the question that created the most psychological safety was the last one, which was, what's an embarrassing moment in your career? And I went first, and we went around the circle, and it was really interesting. It was really fun to see how it became a competition. Who had the biggest goof up? And most of the goof ups were not because we weren't competent, but rather because we were under pressure at the time. We had too much work, too much stress. Something we did to also create the buy-in in psychological safety was to do the 3-day lean yellow belt training, which is basically, in 3 days, how do you improve using the DMAIC method, a simple simulated process, to give people a preview of what was going to be happening in the project and give them some batting practice and get them excited about the concept of improvement. So we used a simulation there. It's like an 11-step process. It's a virtual online simulation game that we have now. So it's called the Department of Addition, where you have a 5-step process to add up a math question for citizens. And you have all the data that you would have in a real life Lean Six Sigma project. So you can get familiar with the data. It's not scary. You understand, why these measures are useful. And then to really make it fun and to create buy-in, we have roles where the clients are typically high touch celebrities. So George Clooney, Celine Dion, some of these high touch celebrities, if they don't get their file within 2 minutes, they come in and they send these chat messages. Where's my file? Where's my file? And you have to respond to those and before you can do your work in the simulation. So it's really, really fun, really, really team building. But that was something that had a lot of success in terms of creating that psychological safety and buy-in at the very beginning. Anything you want to weigh in on, Jeanette, with in terms of the training or psychological safety at the start?
I do, because this experience is very relatable to what the development application staff go through with an application. If someone doesn't get their application in a period of time that they think is appropriate, they start calling. And the nice part about this is that it was very similar to their real life experience, but very safe because it was pretend. So they could joke around and they could see the errors, but it was very relatable, and they could internalize this into their own experience in a very safe way. It also shows them that this is not unique to them. So they don't have to be afraid of talking about what happens, because it's obvious that it happens elsewhere, that a simulation can really hit these very important relatable pieces to their work. And I think that really created a sense of safety up front, was that they could joke around about it. They could kind of criticize it without having to criticize their own work, but it looked a lot like their own work.
All right. Okay. Awesome. So another point, kind of a little photo for you to look at here. How can you tell that this photo has been photoshopped? What about this photo looks fake to you? Type in the chat. What about this photo looks fake to you? Anything stand out to you as maybe being fake in this picture? People will often say, yeah, the bumper sticker. Yeah, see, there's no soap or water on the bumper sticker. And that's kind of some evidence that it's a fake picture. But how else can you tell that it's a fake picture? One other way that you can tell it's a fake picture is that in the history of the world, nobody has ever washed a rented car. No one's ever washed a rented car before. And why don't people wash rented cars? The reason that they don't wash rented cars is typically because they don't own them. So a really major part of creating buy-in in a process improvement project, in our experience, in our learning, is that if the people who do the work, people on the team who do the work, if they don't own the new way of doing things, they're probably not going to do it. So if we take this kind of pure sensei approach, where as a black belt, I say, okay, this is what you do. Just do what I say. Trust me, I'm the sensei. Well, those will be seen as Craig's ideas or Jeanette's ideas, and they won't be owned, and people won't really run with them. So that's a big factor to creating buy-in, is making sure that they own it, and so that they do the solutions. Even though Jeanette or I might have what we think is objectively a better idea, we're going to still work with them on the ideas that they have and help them discover the best ideas they can without giving them the idea. Also, something else that's really critical to create buy-in is making sure that you've got the right people on your process improvement team. There's a really good video. We don't have time to show it in this short talk, but if you grab that link from the PDF, it's a great video. It's called The Dancing Guy in a Hill. It's one guy dancing, and then someone comes and joins him, and he calls to his friends, and they call to their friends, and it becomes like 500 people dancing in just 3 minutes at a concert. And basically, it's the idea that if you start with the right first followers in your project, they'll convince the next group to come along, who will convince the next group to come along, and so on. There's often a paradigm people have, which is that we have to get everybody on the bus. Everyone has to buy into where we're going before we can proceed. Well, if you're going to do that, you're going to get the people who are the laggards. You're going to be trying to get these people to join in. Just use the example of Facebook. Who were the first users of Facebook? They were typically college students at Harvard. They made it interesting or cool for other Ivy League students to get involved in Facebook. And then who made it in turn for other non-Ivy League colleges, who made it cool or interesting. Imagine at one time Facebook was cool or interesting. Can you imagine that? For teenagers and 20s and 30 somethings, what's the fastest growing group of Facebook users right now? My dad, 84 years old. This is the fastest group of Facebook users. If we'd started with the 84-year-olds, would Facebook have created that same movement? Probably not. So identifying who are those influencers, so making sure you've got a representative, at least one from each major job group in the process, and that and the person on the team, the core team, the project team, is got a lot of influence with their peers, and they know the stuff about the process and how it works. So then they'll do the sales job. So if you find yourself as a facilitator chasing people, trying to get them to buy in, then we probably didn't get the right people involved at the front end. Some other stuff, I'll stop after this slide for Jeanette to weigh in a bit with her views in Burlington. Some other things that we do at the front end is give the leaders some homework. One of the things that often happens is that the leaders do a kickoff, and then there's a report out like 5 days later, and the team says, here's our ideas, but there's no check-ins along the way, and we really haven't engaged the leaders. So what do we do with leaders? We've got a really kind of sophisticated set of like fishbone Ishikawa diagram for leaders to fill in about what are some of those meta things that might be affecting the performance of the process. Mindsets, the way people think. Is there a lack of trust between different islands? Is there something about the silos that makes the work not flow? There's lack of a process champion to make sure that the whole end-to-end process gets improved instead of just islands? Measurements, rewards, things like that. And we get the sponsors to fill in this homework, because a lot of the issues that affect the process from the outside are things that only executives can address. So we get them involved, and we give them also a sponsored checklist at each major phase of the project. What are questions that we have for them? And then really importantly, at the end of each day of workshop, we stick around the facilitator, the project lead, and we meet with the executives, maybe just for 15 minutes, to show them this is where we went today, this is what we've learned, this is where we're going tomorrow, here's some questions we have for you. And by the way, executives, do you want to give us any of your thoughts about where we should go next, or any of your preferences, or help put guardrails on us? By doing that, at the end of that 5-day workshop, you've got an executive group that's really keen to proceed and really wants to make it happen. Yeah, so I'll just turn it over to Jeanette to kind of share some of the things that she did on the Burlington side to create buy-in, really high levels of buy-in that you still see today.
Yeah. So it's not just about being a black belt and having the credentials that you can throw around in a room. This works in some cultures, having the black belt that you can throw around in your conversation about how awesome you are. I always say I have a black belt, so that makes me a badass and you should listen to me. But there are certain cultures where this gets you nowhere. And I would say the police is one of them. You have to demonstrate your credibility and you have to earn your credibility. And so it's important that you can connect with people where they are in their experience and they can see their experience appreciated and reflected through the work. And so mediating teams becomes equally important as your qualifications. And job shadowing is, I call it job shadowing, but this is essentially a Gemba walk that I do. If you're a Lean Six Sigma person, you know what a Gemba walk is. Gemba is going to the place that the work is done. And doing this job shadowing builds your empathy for them, but also their empathy for you. And they can understand where you're going with things. They can start to suss out your intentions and you start to build credibility and buy-in as you recognize things and their experience throughout observing their work and asking them questions about their work and experience. Job shadowing happens at all levels. So not only the frontline staff who do the work, but also right up to the executive leader who directs that work and builds the strategy for it, because you need all of those perspectives to make sure that you have that credibility throughout. Your sponsor is important. So if you're a traditional PMP, a sponsor is your key goal for leadership and buy-in that's going to drive this change and make sure you're a priority. But I love that Jody brought up ProSci, because I also marry in the ProSci change management principles to our influence, and the sponsorship coalition becomes important. So how many of you have been trying to lead a project where it's more than one department with more than one leader who needs to be bought in? And so if that is your scenario, you don't need one sponsor. You need a sponsorship coalition with the leaders from all of those groups and gain consensus among them. And regular touch points with them builds that consensus, making sure that that group and your project have shared goals and values. So here are some guiding principles that are going to help us make decisions. These are the goals we're going back to. And when you can see people or the consensus is sliding, you bring them back to those things and you constantly reorient them to those shared objectives. And then sometimes you need to use a tiebreaker, or if you're an agile project manager, I think you call this a product manager. Someone who the team can vote as the tiebreaker, where if you can't establish consensus on a decision, this person gets to make that decision. And the team has empowered that person to do so, so they don't argue with it. And so it allows you to continue to move forward in your decision making and get over those barriers without needing full consensus across the group. Okay.
Okay, let's turn. So we've covered a little bit on creating great ideas, the I in the equation. You know, how can we create these breakthrough solutions by challenging our assumptions and improve by 80% instead of just 20%. Well, we've looked a little bit at creating desire or buy-in. Now let's turn to the one that everybody forgets about, which is execution, right? Oh, we're so exhausted after getting people on the bus that we've presented out. Now we've presented a PowerPoint deck to our sponsor and wow, we've reached the finish line. Well, that's not the finish line. That's only the halfway mark because we still have to try our solution experiments. Now, one of the things that happens is that, that's improvement work. We've got urgent stuff happening today. And if we get the team together for like 5 consecutive business days, yeah, they'll make a lot of progress, but there's a lot of work they won't be doing of the daily work as well. So instead of like, let's say taking 12, I'll just use this example. We don't take 12, well, we sometimes do take 12 consecutive focus days to implement the solution experiments and refine them. But if you said, well, you know what, 12 continuous days with this small team, we've got a better moving process at the end of those 12 days. It functions better, and we get rid of our backlog from being away for 12 days. So that's the benefit of taking just 12 days. But if we said, you know what, that 12 consecutive days with this team of 5 people, it's too much. Let's just do like one meeting a week over 12 months, so 52 meetings over the course of 12 months. And that would be less painful. We'd be taking the Band-Aid off a bit slower, but it wouldn't be as painful operationally. I'd like you to type in the chat, what are some problems that would happen to that 12-month project that wouldn't happen to the 12 focus days project, where we get everyone face to face in the room or virtual room. They do the whole project, they try the experiments on real live work, and at the end of 12 days, the process actually works. What are some problems that would happen to the 12-month project stretched out over 12 months as opposed to the one that's just 12 days? Priorities change again and again. Yeah. Leaders, the more time they have, the more time they have to think about what new priorities they might take on. Scope creep, says Mel. Tatum, loss of interest or focus. Yeah, you know what? Is it slow work that people think, slow moving work people think is important, or fast moving work people think is important? Fast work almost always, right? So they'll jump on that. And then the slow work, people don't pay as much attention to it. So then what do? We hire a human change management consultant to convince people that this project is really, really important when we've signaled it's not important by stretching it out over so much time. Loss of interest, focus, loss of funding, forget the details of your objectives. People leave, lose momentum. Legal compliance changes that need to be adopted, more time spent on recaps. People forget. How many status updates are you doing on a 12-month project versus a 12-day project? Competing priorities take over, overtaken by events. I don't know if anyone said it here, but also the work that we've already done, as it ages, it doesn't age like a fine Bordeaux. It ages like fish out of the refrigerator. So then we have to go back and do the work. Have you ever noticed that if you do a value stream map with your team and then you put it down for a month and then you go and try to analyze it after a month later, if you try to analyze it, people go, well, that's not the process because we changed it. As soon as we made the map visible, we changed the process. So you've just highlighted, you've just given some evidence of all the problems that happen to slow work that don't happen to fast work. So what can we do to create much more, to avoid that tax on slow moving work? Jeanette, do you want to, is this me or you? Is this me?
This is me. Yep.
Okay.
You can just bring them all up at the same time here.
All right, there we go.
So this is very difficult in a municipal government because prioritization is often not super well executed. I'm going to admit, like in any municipality I've worked, everything's a priority and no one wants to give you money for it because taxpayers don't like high taxes. So it is very difficult to avoid the tax on slow moving projects. For our first project with our low density applications, we were able to actually let the backlog grow. So we knowingly took staff off of doing the review work and put them on the project and had them focus on doing project work instead. And then strategically used our leadership to message that strategy, why we were doing it and the outcomes we should have. The backlog grew, but we were going to metabolize the backlog, get rid of it because we were going to solution quickly. And we did. So on something like that, we knowingly stepped away from the work, let the work grow, let the backlog grow, but manage that through a calm strategy and a change management strategy. In the current project, it's a little more difficult because we do have legislative timelines we have to meet, so we can't let the backlog grow, or there's a real legal risk to getting what's called a non-decision appeal if we don't make a decision within a certain time. So instead, we've protected regular cadence of days where the entire day is just project work and nothing else is allowed to be scheduled within that day. That is, however, more slow moving, and the challenges that you put in the chat are challenges that we are working with. But some of these strategies here on the slide has helped us work through it. So making sure we're just doing one thing at a time, getting it done before moving on to the next, rather than trying to do 6 things and dividing our attention. We're actually moving through solutions and implementation faster that way. Making space for improvements. So the leaders and that sponsor coalition I talked about act as a shield. So not only for the work getting done, shielding people from distractions, making sure that block time is in fact blocked and saved, but also shielding the priority. So as you go over time, that priority doesn't get lost. That sponsor coalition is consistently is being maintained across leaders across the organization. And if you can, the best way to do it is dedicated resources. So if you can backfill some of your subject matter experts and allow them to just focus on project work, you can do this very quickly and you won't have to backfill them for very long. Okay. Thanks, Craig.
All righty. Just something else around execution is the concept of treating your solutions like an experiment. It's so much easier to get permission to try an experiment. We're going to attempt this this solution on one single real life file with a safety net underneath it. Then we're going to do a little retrospective after. That's a lot easier to get approval for than to say, here's your new process, please sign here in triplicate, and you're stuck with it forever. Meanwhile, you don't have any evidence. So what we try to do is use the experimentation approach. If anyone that's done the marshmallow challenge before, you try to create the tallest structure out of 20 pieces of spaghetti, 3 feet of string, some tape, and a marshmallow has to stand on top. Who creates the tallest structures? Well, architects and engineers. Who creates the worst structures? Recent graduates of business school, fresh MBAs, because they're taught with the case study method, which is all about coming up with the best solution, but not ever testing it out. Whereas kindergarten kids, they make this structure a little taller, then they add something to it and add something to it, and then they by doing real quick experiments, they get a lot better at it. So, Jeanette, maybe you want to take us through some of the experiments, just a high level of some of the experiments that you folks tried, and we've got just about 4 minutes left here.
Yeah, so I won't go into each experiment individually, but you can see some of the details here. I think the point to be made, though, is using a plan, do, check, act cycle to your advantage. And so I had the difficult experience with planners. Planners are very much like that business graduate group where they like to come up with every eventuality up front before they try anything so they can prevent all risk before it happens. And that makes it very difficult to implement quickly. But if you start with something very small that they're very comfortable with and doesn't present a lot of risk and allow them to implement that, then have them reflect on it. What went well? What didn't go well? What do we want to do differently? And use these plan, do, check, act cycles to allow them to iterate and improve over time. My team started in a very risk adverse area, but I've been able to take them into like a full rehaul of their pre-consultation process with a whole new focus on how we do it because they did it one small step at a time. So it felt safe and the risk was mitigated along the way, and they got to test things before they launched it. And so it felt less risky to try new things.
Okay, a handful of things you can try out when you go back to your natural habitat. Number one is think about the finish line. It's not a report that you issue to your sponsors. Rather, it's that you've got a measurably improved process that continues to improve as well. So it's 50%. It's at least 50% farther than producing that report. And my observation in doing this stuff for over 25 years is that there's maybe 20% of our job is engineering and 80% is psychology, sociology. So be so proactive on the human side. Invest in execution. Be realistic about how much effort it's going to take. Make a work breakdown of all your experiments and get them into calendars right away so that you're not chasing schedules later on. Prioritize what's most important. Say no to the things that maybe aren't. Jeanette's point, I think, is a really good one. Shielding space for improvement and psychological safety. Make sure it's a safe space and that people are protected from the daily work to really focus on their improvement work. And instead of trying to get it perfect the first time, focus instead on making progress and doing it more iteratively. These are some things you could try as well. And feel free to use the results formula. If you're interested, there's a section on our website, Results Not Resistance, and I do a one-day course. If you have a group of people, you can actually sign up for it. If enough people sign up, we can do a delivery of it if you follow the QR code or the link. And it's basically you come in with a real life project that you're either going to start or that you've already started, and you see where the gaps are and you try to close those gaps and come out of it with a plan to increase your results score. So that's there if you're curious. Jeanette's contact information, my contact information is there. Don't hesitate to reach out. We love talking to people in our community, and we love to help you avoid the mistakes that we've made along the way as well. Anything else, Jeanette, before we sign off?
No, that's it. Unless anyone has a burning question.
Yeah. No. Okay. Well, don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have questions. You want an informal sounding board. We're happy to give you some thoughts of what we learned along the way. Jeanette, thank you so much for taking the time to do this talk a second time after your own conference. I really appreciate it, and I think you've given some really great practical stuff that people can apply in their own world. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us.